Angelica Rivera. I'm a product of public schools. I know what it's like. I've been there. I've been through the overcrowded classrooms. I've been through the budget cuts, and I've been through teachers not being able to teach for lack of funding. And now I have two beautiful sons. I want better for them. I want them to have better schools, and I want them to have a better experience. I want them to learn, to think critically, and to become well-rounded individuals. I want them to go to college, and I need them to have the programs necessary for them to compete for those colleges. I get involved because it's everyone's business to get involved, for greater schools, greater state, and greater country. I'm tired of these politicians and their excuses. The time is now. No more excuses. Educate every student.
Hi, I'm Billy Easton. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Quality Education, and I'm here in the New York State Capitol building to talk with you about the education of our children in New York State. AQE has spent the last 13 years leading the fight to ensure every child in New York State has a high-quality education. But this is not a fight that's mostly about what happens in this building. It's not a fight that I lead. It's a fight that you lead, and is mostly about what happens in your community and what you and folks just like you across the state are doing to hold our elected officials accountable to deliver on the promise of a quality education for every student. Today, we want to talk with you about what you can do to ensure that 2014 is finally the year that our elected leaders here in Albany deliver on the promise of a quality education for every student. The education that in fact is their constitutional right and that is an economic necessity for New York State's future.
Education is the right.
2014 is a critically important election here in New York State. We're going to be electing a governor, and we're going to be electing every single member of the state Senate and the state Assembly. What's going to be at the top of your mind when you go in and vote? How about our public schools? What could be more important than the education of our school children? Sometimes it's hard to understand how it is that decisions that get made here in the state capitol end up affecting what goes on in classrooms across the state. But in fact, the decisions that they make here have a huge impact on whether or not our kids get the education they need. The decisions that are made here end up determining whether kids have a high-quality curriculum, art and music courses, extra tutoring if they need it, small class sizes, help for English language learners, all the things that add up to a high-quality education. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to work together, AQE and everybody across the state, to make sure that 2014 truly is the year of the student. In order to do that, we're asking all of you to come to Albany in November 20th, to launch the No More Excuses, Educate Every Student campaign. And we have a statewide education summit here in Albany. We're asking you to come back in January, because January is when the governor puts out his budget, and we need to be here and ready to react. And we're asking you to come back again in March, because that's when the legislature will be voting on that budget. But most importantly, we need you to organize your neighbors, your community, and we need you to make decisions locally about how you're going to put pressure on your local elected officials to make sure that everyone in the state legislature and the governor delivers on the promise of a high-quality education. No more excuses. Educate every student. our schools. There's three sources of funding for our schools: local property taxes, the state budget, and the federal government. The federal government only provides about 10% of the funding for our schools. The vast majority comes from the local and state sources. The state has cut back its role substantially. Just a few years ago, the state was providing 50% of the funding for our schools. Now, they've cut that back to just 40%. What's that meant? Well, for one thing, we've passed the burden on to local property taxpayers, and for another, we've seen substantial cuts. In fact, in just the last few years, we've seen cuts of 35,000 teachers and other educators, cuts in music and art, cuts in summer school, cuts in elective courses like career courses and like advanced placement courses, and cuts in extracurricular activities and athletics, and much more. In fact, we're going to keep seeing cuts like that unless the state starts doing something different. A few years ago, here in Albany, we had a very important victory in the courts. In what's called the Campaign for Physical Equity, the highest court in the state ruled that New York State was violating the constitutional rights of our students to get a quality education, and they forced the state to take action. In 2007 and 2008, finally, we saw the resources flow, targeted to high needs communities, and they had strings attached to make sure they were going to effective programs. We saw improvement, but since then, all that's been taken away. The state made huge cuts, and in the last couple of years, the state's made increases, but they've been too small to keep up with the cost of education, which means still more classroom cuts. So we need a new direction here in New York State. Now that they've broken the promise of the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, we need the state to get serious about providing the resources over the next several years that will be necessary to educate every student and focus again on improving our schools. One of the important factors is the school funding formula. There's a lot of talk about the school funding formula. It's very complicated and can be very confusing. In fact, there's multiple formulas in New York State. But the most important one is what's called the foundation formula. It was set up in 2007. It's a good formula, but it needs to be improved. And most importantly, the state needs to make the commitment necessary to fund that formula, because no formula works if you don't fund it. So we need the state to pay back the funds that have been cut, and we need to fix the formula. We need to make sure it focuses in first and foremost on student need and local school districts' ability to provide their own resources, so we can ensure that all students have access to a high-quality education. And we need to make sure that that funding is invested in effective programs, because fair funding plus smart investment equals quality education.
New York State, we know what works in education. It's not rocket science, but it's definitely research proven. One of those programs that ensures that our children are successful is pre-K. Currently, we only provide half of our 4-year-olds with pre-K opportunities. The time to invest is now. The benefits are clear. Our children are more likely to go to college, more likely to excel academically, more likely to have higher paying jobs, and less likely to be incarcerated. And if that wasn't enough, for every $1 that we invest in pre-K, we as taxpayers save $7 to $10 in the future. That's an investment we can count on.
My boys are 3 years old. Good early childhood education programs are highly important. I'm looking for a program where they can be prepared for kindergarten and for college. I want them in a program where they can learn, where they can play, and where they can be happy. Currently, in New York State, we have half-day programs that are supported by the state, but we need more access to full-day programs. We need the state to expand on the program that they created this year. We really need it.
Another program that works are community schools. Community schools are opportunity hubs. They address the needs of the whole child and whole community. By addressing the social and emotional needs of students, they can learn. And we must ensure that we're funding these opportunity hubs for communities that need them. Why? Because it creates a greater engagement in learning. It increases attendance and decreases dropout rates. It ensures meaningful parent engagement and increases the physical and mental and emotional supports. And if that wasn't enough, as a community school, it also provides nutrition. Nutrition for all students by ensuring that there's breakfast, lunch, and snacks for after school. And as a state, we need to invest in what works, and that is community schools. As we raise the bar for higher standards, we need to ensure that students have the tools and programs necessary to reach that bar. We must ensure that all students, special needs students, and English language learners have access to this rich curriculum. Through expanded learning time, we can ensure that all students have access to art, music, sports, and advanced placement courses. These are some of the courses that keep our most struggling students engaged in school. And these are the programs that colleges look for students to have when reviewing their application. It's time to invest in a challenging and engaging curriculum. Who's in our schools more than students? Teachers, and they need to feel supported. We need to invest in career ladders and peer mentoring. Help our teachers hone their craft, and move from an I gotcha to a supportive and collaborative approach. We should want our teachers to do better, to be the best they can be. And since I know we do, New York State needs to invest in these opportunities for teachers. A positive school climate allows for teachers and students to feel respected and safe, and it keeps students in school. Did you know that when students are suspended, they are more likely to engage in misbehavior in the future, fail academically, and drop out? The reality is, Black and brown students are more likely to be suspended for minor infractions. But there's alternatives. There's a better way. Restorative justice approaches and positive behavior interventions allow for students to have the supports needed to identify why they misbehaved in the first place. Did you know that Buffalo, New York is a national leader in this area? They switched from zero tolerance policies to adopt a more restorative justice approach. And we need New York to follow the lead of Buffalo and implement these strategies across the state.
The time is now. We know what works and we know what it takes. It takes everyone being involved. Join me and other parents with AQE as we raise our voices. Go to a strategy session about this campaign in your local area. Come to an education summit November 20th and write to your local representatives to let them know that you care about education and about our children. My children matter as much as anyone else's. No more excuses. Educate every student.
No more excuses. Educate every student.
No more excuses. Educate every student.